Hi, I'm Irfan Ali from ArtReach.
And I'm Amber Morley from the City of Toronto and the South Etobicoke Youth Assembly.
And we're here to share a couple of tips about grant writing. Getting started. So before we dive in, let's acknowledge that grant writing can be a pretty difficult process. So here's a couple of general tips to make it easier for you. Number one, give yourself time. Don't rush. Make sure you have time to write the application, but also that you have time to do your editing, time to get feedback from other people and other members of your community, and also time to request support materials like letters of support. Number two, write clearly. Don't use too much academic jargon, don't use too many buzzwords, and don't use poetic language. You want to be clear and to the point. Number three, be concise. Remember, the people judging your applications are going to have a lot of different applications to read, so don't fluff up your words unnecessarily. Number four, give specific details and make sure your numbers are right. You want to show your funder that you really thought through your project and that you're not just guessing, that you've thought through every specific detail, so make sure to include those. And last but not least, number five, show your passion. Your funder is really going to like it if you show that you're enthusiastic and really excited about the project, and that'll really strengthen the chances that you'll actually get the funding.
Sources of funding. So there are many different places you can get funding in Canada. One of the best places to start would be government organizations like Canadian Heritage, Trillium Foundation, or even the Ontario Arts Council. A secondary place of funding would be private organizations like ArtReach Toronto or the Laidlaw Foundation. There are also groups like Q Collective who give out seed money in smaller amounts to get started on smaller projects. So definitely check those out. If you're not sure where to start, artreach.org is a great resource and will direct you to the various funders and to their applications. Another very important thing to think about when you're looking at securing funding is to connect with the organizations that you think would be beneficial to you. There's always going to be a large description on what they look to fund, so make sure that you're eligible before you reach out, and make sure that you do your due diligence and read through the criteria. Once you know for sure that you're a good fit for that funder, always reach out and give them a call. There's generally granting officers that will help you along the way and through the process. So the earlier you get in touch, the more they'll be able to support you through your application process.
So the parts of the application. So most grant applications will vary from funder to funder, but they tend to have four main sections. Their narrative or your descriptions, the work plan, the budget, and support material. Also, don't forget that while the judging process may also vary, most funders use an impartial jury of experts in the field, and that'll be important later on.
We're going to get into the narrative part of your application. This is where you give us a brief factual description of what you're hoping to accomplish. You have to include in this portion what art form it is that you're using, how many people you're going to be working with, the population or demographic of the community you're working within, as well as the length of the project. It is super important at this portion to be very realistic and factual. It's going to give us an idea of what you hope to accomplish with this project.
The next section of your narrative is your community description. So in this section, make sure to cover what are the specific issues or needs that are facing your community. Also make sure to describe the community and don't just focus on the geographic description. Two other aspects of this section which are really important, if you have access to them, reports or research such as the Roots of Youth Violence report or the Stepping Up framework can really strengthen your case. Also, don't forget to include personal stories or quotes from your population, from your community, because these can also really work to strengthen the case you're making.
The next portion of the narrative is telling us who you are. So we want to know what your mandate, mission, and goals are for your respective groups or organizations. Give us an idea of what your accomplishments have been to date. If you have any awards or things that you'd like to report on of past successes, those always help to give us a better sense of your abilities as a group and working together towards a project. Definitely make sure to highlight any other important members that you'll be working with. So Irfan will talk about partnerships, but if you have any board members or community mentors that you work with, it's always, this portion is telling us how come you are the best to get this project done. So make sure to give us a good description of everyone involved.
As Amber mentioned, the last section of the narrative is partnerships. Sometimes with certain grants, there isn't a separate section for partnerships, so you might have to weave this into the other parts of your grant application. But if there is a separate section, make sure that you highlight who are your partners, Why are they the right fit for your project? And why did you choose to work with them and not someone else? Also, make sure, of course, to include what are they providing. Is it in-kind contributions like food or materials to your project? Is it programming space? Is it administrative support? Make sure to be specific in what they're providing and how much.
So the next section we're going to get into is the work plan portion of the application. Work plans are the most difficult for some people, and they vary most between funders. Your work plan is basically a roadmap of how the project is actually going to get implemented. So it's a very, very crucial portion of the application. Included in the work plan, you're going to have your goals, objectives, activities, roles, timelines, and evaluation all coming together.
So goals, objectives, and activities are a section where a lot of people do get mixed up. So a good way to think of them is this. Your goals are the larger kind of impact that you're hoping that your project is going to have on your community, and they're usually pretty difficult to measure. Below that's your objectives. So your objectives are the more specific impacts and results or products of your project, and they're usually a lot more measurable than your goals. Finally, your activities are the specific things that you'll be undertaking to achieve your objectives. So these could include things like rehearsals, workshops, your outreach activities, your showcases, anything that you're actually doing to complete those objectives. Make sure in this section with your activities, be specific. Don't just say that you're going to be doing workshops. Say we'll be doing 2 3-hour workshops for 10 youth in 5 different communities across the city, because that'll show your funders that you've thought through and you're much more invested in your project.
You also want to make sure that when you're highlighting your activities, you always tie in the roles and the timelines that are associated with them. So for example, if we're talking about a workshop activity, who are the important key members that are going to be included in that? So a facilitator, participants, what other materials might you need? Very important things to think about. And then of course the timeline with that activity. So whether it be, planning an organization for the first month and then 2 months of implementation, whatever the timeline looks like, you always want to make sure to include that. So it's a very clear roadmap for your work. The other part that you never want to forget with your work plan is evaluation. The absolute most important thing for a funder is to know that an organization is clearly focused on evaluation and you're constantly monitoring your work. So always taking track of, how many folks are there, getting feedback from your participants, always monitoring, and also keeping track of that evaluation portion is very important when you're wanting to do your end of project summaries, as well as going back for future funding. You want to have those statistics on hand.
The budget. Most funders will provide you with a budget template, so make sure to use a template that they provide. All your income and expenses should add up to 0, so make sure everything does add up. With income, it's really important to indicate whether funding is confirmed or unconfirmed at that point, which means whether you've gotten it or you've just put in an application you're hoping that you will get it in the future. With your expenses, some common categories include staffing, administration, program expenses, and capital costs. With your expenses section, be sure to provide specific details. Don't just say that you have a workshop facilitator budget of $4,000. Put down, why is it $4,000? 2 facilitators times $200 times 10 workshops equals $4,000. That is way better and shows your funder that you've really thought through every budget item. Another really important thing to remember is don't forget to add in-kind contributions. In-kind contributions like free programming space, volunteer hours, program resources, food, whatever the community is providing to you for free is really, really important because it shows your funder that there's a lot of community support for the work that you're doing. And finally, make sure that every budget line in your budget relates to something in the work plan. You don't want to just start creating budget lines for stuff that's not reflected in the work plan that you've laid out in the previous section, because it'll show your funder that you haven't really thought through your project completely, and they don't like surprises.
So for supporting materials, if you can add them to your application, it'll absolutely strengthen it. Things like photos, testimonials, letters of intent from your partners, and community support letters are all really great things that'll help strengthen that application. Make sure that you get these well in advance. Don't leave it to the last minute to connect with your community partners, but ask for these things ahead of time so that you can put them included with the full final package of your grant application.